We've begun our tour of the Premiere Pro interface by looking at the project panel and the source monitor. So please watch the previous videos to get up to speed on importing media into the project panel and using bins and looking at clips, and then navigating and marking clips in the source monitor. As you can see, I have marked a clip here and I'm ready to edit it down to the timeline. So there are a few ways to do this, but for now, I'm just going to drag and drop. So I'm going to drag from within the image of the source monitor and drop down here in the timeline. All right, so this brings the shot into the timeline, forming the very beginning of my sequence. I see it graphically here in the timeline, and then I see it visually here in the program monitor. Another thing that happens is that a sequence is created in the project panel. You can see that this is the icon for a sequence. And the name of the sequence right now is just the name of the clip. We don't want to leave it named that, so I'm just going to single click in here, and I'm going to name it Bakery Demo 1, okay? So here is my sequence, and you can see that it was renamed here in the timeline and in the program monitor as well. Let's go over some timeline navigation techniques. I'm just going to select it, and then if I need to zoom in, I can use this slider down here. Or I can use my plus and minus keys on the keyboard. So if I press plus repeatedly, I slowly zoom in. And if I press minus repeatedly, I zoom out. Now to fit this clip, whether it's one clip or 500 clips, whatever is in the timeline, to fit it within the window of the timeline, I press the backslash key. Okay, so I'll press backslash, and it fits it in there. If I press backslash again, it goes back to the previous view, okay? To navigate in the timeline, I can press Spacebar to play and to stop.
This is the wonderful thing about
I can also use my JKL. L goes forward,
about the farmer's market.
K pauses, and J goes backward.
The cramps are marvelous.
And everything we learned about variable speed, fast motion, and slow motion applies here in the timeline as well. Let's just add several more shots to the sequence so we can go over a few more navigation techniques in the timeline. And I'm not going to carefully select my shots. I'm just going to come up to B-roll and load a couple of these shots and mark an in and an out. And I'm going to drag this down. By default, I have snapping on, which gives me this magnetic behavior here, okay? So keep that in mind because I'll show you in just a bit how to turn that off if you need to. But for now, I'd like to leave it enabled as I build this short sequence. So I'm going to next load this shot and mark an in and an out, and I'll bring that down. And one more. Okay. All right, so as you can see, the timeline continues to show a nice graphical representation of my edits. And as I scrub through, you can see the visual output here in the program monitor. If I want to go from edit to edit, I press my up and down arrow keys. So down to go forward or later in my edit, and up to go backward or earlier in my edit. Let me add just one more clip to my sequence, and I'll mark an in and an out. And this time, I'm going to turn off snapping. So this right here is snapping, keyboard shortcut S. So when I deselect that and then bring this down, notice that I no longer have that magnetism, okay? So this is sometimes to your advantage when you really need to line something up. But in this case, where I want these shots flush up against one another, it's not desirable. So I'm just going to press S, and then right now I have snapping back. Just a few more things about the timeline that I'd like to call out. If you would like to change your track height, you can do so by just hovering in between two tracks and then dragging up or down, okay? Notice that when you do make your video track tall enough, you can see the individual thumbnails on each of your clips, which can be helpful, all right? And you can also increase or decrease the size of your audio tracks. You can also do this with your mouse scroll wheel. So if I hover over my track here and then hold down Option or Alt on a PC and then scroll up with my mouse scroll wheel or down, I can increase or decrease the size of my tracks. And then just one more keyboard shortcut for now. If I press Shift plus, all of my tracks will expand to this height, and if I press Shift minus, they'll all collapse to this height. Okay, so I'll press Shift plus for now. Okay, so we'll learn a lot more timeline tricks when we actually get started editing. But this should give you a nice foundation of some of the ways that you can view and navigate the powerful Premiere Pro timeline.